Resident Evil 6 was released in October of 2012 by Capcom, and is often cited as what almost killed the Resident Evil franchise. On release, it was met with pretty diverse reviews, both amongst fans of the series as well as critics. This mainly stems from the fact that the game was considered an even bigger departure from the series' survival horror roots than Resident Evil 5 was. I decided to try this game for the first time recently to see if it's as bad as I've been led to believe, or if there's actually a good game here. Join me as I dive deep into Resident Evil 6. This game is definitely one of Capcom's most ambitious projects for the time. The game's story is spread into multiple campaigns across 4 different characters, each with their own side characters, as well as each of their narratives interconnecting with each other. I started with Leon's campaign first because I've heard people say that his campaign is considered the best of the bunch, and because he's my favourite Resident Evil character. In my personal opinion, this is probably the closest this game gets to feeling like a Resident Evil game, but not really. His campaign starts with him shooting the President of the United States, who's been infected with some kind of virus. This is framed as a pretty emotional moment for Leon, as he was also close friends with the President. He was going to expose the US government's involvement with the Raccoon City incident. Leon's partner for his story is Helena Harper, a Secret Service agent who claims to know what's going on, and will tell us if we go to Tall Oaks Cathedral. We start off at Ivy University, trying to make our way there. Even though this game isn't a survival horror game, as I'll soon get into, the opening level is very atmospheric, as all the lights are out, it's dark, there's a thunderstorm outside at night, and overall the environment feels very oppressive. After fighting our way through a subway system in a small city block, we eventually make our way to the cathedral. The graphics here are pretty great for a 2012 game, with a good amount of detail to the environments, as well as the character models. They even tried to implement an element of backtracking from other games by needing to retrieve a key for a gate. It's only a brief detour, but hey, it's something. This attempt at capturing elements from the original games is shattered, however, as we engage in another shootout. You can see the game's heavy focus on action, as in this game there's a dedicated melee mechanic. By pressing the right trigger on your controller, you can do a 3-hit combo as well as a finisher for big damage. There's a stamina bar to stop you from spamming it, but melee combat feels overpowered in this game, as you can still run around and shoot even if you run out of stamina. I feel that this has been slightly dumbed down and less dynamic from Resident Evil 5 and 4, as in those games you can shoot enemies in different body parts to get a different reaction out of them, thus needing to set them up for a melee attack, rewarding smart gameplay. You also had to be mindful of your spacing and positioning in those games, as you didn't want to get ambushed by enemies off screen. Shortly after, we enter the cathedral and do some puzzles, such as placing 2 statues on 2 different platforms to unlock a door, using the laser sight on a pistol on a dial to unlock a door, and sniping some bells to get another statue which unblocks another path for us. These are pretty basic and easy puzzles, but hey, at least they provide a brief break from the shooting and action thus far. We make our way under the cathedral, revealing a secret lab. We investigate the lab and find a VHS tape labeled Happy Birthday Ada Wong. In the video, we see what looks like Ada Wong bursting out of a cocoon. This causes great confusion to both Leon and Helena, as this isn't what she wanted to show him. After shooting and elbow dropping more zombies, we head deeper underground and find a mysterious woman who turns to be Helena's sister named Deborah. She soon molds into a cocoon, just like Ada in the video. She soon bursts out of it as well, becoming a bioweapon that we have to fight, much to Helena's dismay. Ada Wong also shows up shortly after, providing even more confusion on her motives. One crazy boss fight and me failing it like 3 times due to how horrible my aim is, we defeat her. We then get a flashback showing that Derek Simmons, the head of security, was using Helena's sister as an experiment and leveraging Helena's Secret Service perks to create a hole in the President's security and infect him with the new C virus. Chapter 3 starts with Simmons contacting us and basically plans to frame us for the murder of the President. We venture deeper into the catacombs and fight more zombies. This is actually when I discovered by accident that you can dodge by pressing the X button in the direction while aiming. This is a pretty useful mechanic, which makes me wonder why the game didn't even bother to tell us about it in any way. We explore the cave some more, and this is where we see how some levels are built around having a co-op partner, such as helping launch our partner onto a platform, sniping enemies while they try to do something, and or assist in activating a mechanism. It's clear that this game has an even more cooperative focus than Resident Evil 5, however, there's some things that I feel that have been stripped away. For instance, you can't give healing items or ammo to your partner, I mean, you can also heal your partner if you use a tablet near them, but much more like the dodge, I discovered it by accident. Also, both of you have the same guns and loadouts due to the inventory being different and not having to worry about inventory management. This also puts less of an emphasis on having specialized roles and loadouts so you can strategize and cater to different playstyles. Again, making this game feel like a step back from Resident Evil 5. One terrible swimming section later, and we're fighting a giant BOW shark, and it was at this point where I started to question what the fuck I was even playing. I mean, yes, there were BOW sharks in RE1 Remake, but those weren't gigantic sized ones like this one, and that part of the game is tense as you're essentially a cub stepping into the lion's den. Here, this looks like something Michael Bay would cook up in a cocaine-fueled madness. Just look at this scene too. You're riding down a waterfall while shooting an assault rifle at a giant shark. It takes jumping the shark to a whole nother level. Chapter 4 starts with Leon and Helena on a plane, flying to China to track down Simmons. The plane starts to go off course, only to find out a BOW has killed the pilots. This one can shoot toxic gas from its body. Sounds like a pretty bad night at Taco Bell if you ask me. We make short work of it, and Hunnigan instructs us to go to the tail of the plane to see what's wrong. We make it to the hull, only to encounter the same BOW. We quickly have to open the back of the plane up to clear the gas and get rid of the BOW. I got flashbacks from that one frustrating boss fight from Code Veronica where you had to send a tyrant out of the plane. Good times. I also discovered that this game has a cover mechanic where I was trying to get this herb and a serpent coin, but it's probably one of the most awkward cover mechanics I've used. To take cover, you have to hold the left trigger and press the X button to go into cover. You also have to press the left trigger the entire time, or else you just go out of cover. To peek out of cover, you have to use the left thumbstick to peek out. I've never got used to it over the course of my playthrough, and there's times like this where I stuck to the walls by accident. Also, for some reason, the gas has infected everyone else in the plane, except for Leon and Helena for some reason. Anyway, we make it to the back of the cockpit, and playing as Leon, Hunnigan guides him via radio on how to fly the plane. After Leon crashes the plane in spectacular fashion, we run into Jake Mueller, a man who we don't know much about yet, and Sherry Birkin, a returning character from Resident Evil 2, who's all grown up and is a government agent, much like Leon. Here, we can see some of the connective tissue between the campaigns. It's nice to see her make a return to the series and see what she's been up to, and it's nice to see this reunion as well, as Leon was basically like a protector to Sherry after her actual father, William Birkin, infected himself with the G virus, and her mum was more absorbed in her work for Umbrella than her own daughter. It would have been great if Claire was here for it as well. Before they can all get acquainted, another BOW named Ustanak, basically this game's version of Mr. X or Nemesis, as we'll see in the other campaigns. It's a pretty standard boss fight. I thought you had to do something with this tower because the camera keeps zooming into it at one point, but all you have to do is just shoot him and deal enough damage. Once we do so, the nearby tower comes crashing down on Ustanak, presumably killing him. Leon, Helena, Sherry, and Jake all get separated in the aftermath, and we go back to tracking down Simmons. We try going across some kind of market, and come across a door that needs 3 keys to open. Before we can start looking for them, we are ambushed by another BOW, this time by one that takes on a leech humanoid-like form and can regenerate. It reminds me of the regenerators from RE4, but honestly not as scary. You don't even take them down in a unique fashion like that as well. You just shoot their torso and legs off until they start moving, making sure they don't get close and reattach. We come across a warehouse shortly after and run into Ada again. We try to talk to her, but she clearly isn't interested and evades us. We chase after her, sliding through some laser grids, and fighting these things that look like robots that clean your carpet for you. We close in on Ada, only to run into Chris Redfield and his partner, Pierce Nivens. Leon and Chris get into a fight, with Chris thinking that Ada is behind the recent attacks. Leon explains that it's not her, and Simmons is behind this. Chris and Pierce go after Ada, and we continue to make our way to Simmons. This is a pretty big moment, as this was the first time we saw these two interact with each other in a mainline Resident Evil game. We eventually get to him, only to be outnumbered by him and his men. We run into Sherry and Jake again. Sherry gives Leon a SIM card that contains info on how to stop the C virus, and they soon split, with Leon and Helena going after Simmons, with Jake and Sherry making a run for it. Someone sneaks up on Simmons and stabs him with a syringe, injecting a sample of the C virus into him. Simmons makes an escape on a nearby subway car, with Leon and Helena chasing after him. You remember that rant I went on about the shark earlier? Well, now we're fighting a guy who turns into a mutant dog like a fucking transformer. This game series started with 5 cops getting stuck in a mansion with zombies, by the way. I mean, seriously, the past 2 chapters could qualify as a finale for any other Resident Evil game. Absurd spectacle aside, this boss fight is pretty standard. Just shoot and dodge and beat him senselessly until the subway train runs him over and we're forced to jump into the river. Once Leon and Helena get back on land, Chris calls Leon on the radio, telling him to get out of the immediate area as a missile lands, causing a mass outbreak of zombies. Leon asks Chris to go rescue Jake and Sherry on a nearby oil rig. Chris also tells Leon that Ada is dead, shocking Leon. We slowly make our way through the chaos and try not to get ourselves infected. We eventually make our way to a military ATV and slowly drive our way through the area, consumed by a thick blue mist and the undead. We try fighting our way through the crowds until we get to a big explosion. We jump onto a nearby chopper, prompting to fulfill some QTEs. Yeah, this game also had a lot of QTEs throughout it, and it was very popular at the time. RE5 had a lot of them, but here it just feels excessive. Another spectacular crash. Seriously, between Leon and Joseph Joestar, I don't know who's crashed more aircrafts. We crash into a stadium, which is where we have our final confrontation with Derek Simmons. Now he can transform into a mutant T-Rex, as if the mutant dog form wasn't enough. The fight isn't spectacular either. You just shoot with your guns and hop on the back of a truck and shoot at it and lay the smack down on Simmons' human form. After a while, Ada shows up again to help us, even though Chris told us she died. I wonder why. Derek chases Ada, and we follow suit. The elevator crashes, making our pursuit difficult. Leon is able to jump across to Ada, shielding her from Simmons' assault. She gets up, and we finish Simmons off. It's pretty similar to his fight in the last chapter, but you get even less space to dodge his attacks, and there's zombies that randomly spawn in to distract you. Ada saves us from falling, killing Simmons, or so we think, as he turns into a giant fly. Yeah, we've gone from turning into a giant dog, then a T-Rex, and finally, a giant fly. I'm surprised this form didn't come together and form a Power Rangers villain. This boss fight is actually somewhat unique though. You have to shoot these glowing spots on the boss to weaken it. Then we have to shoot at a zombie that's been stabbed by a lightning rod, baiting the boss into absorbing the rod, killing itself. We head to a chopper, and then things wrap up nicely. Leon and Helena are able to clear their names from the incident with the president, and Helena puts her sister to rest. Overall, some of the highlights of Leon's campaign for me were the cathedral and the starting mission. The atmosphere is so great in those levels, and there's a better sense of escalation compared to the other campaigns. I like the story in it too, although some of the plot points, like Helena's relationship with Deborah, are pretty tossed together quickly, as if the game's plot is already trying to juggle too many things at once, as we'll soon see. I do appreciate that some horror elements were attempted to be put here, but it definitely pales in comparison to some of the classic games in hell, even places like in Resident Evil 4, like the research facility with the regenerators. If you're enjoying the video so far, be sure to give it a like, as that really helps me out a lot as well. Now, onto Jake's campaign. Jake's campaign starts off with him in Edonia, Eastern Europe. Jake is a freelance mercenary who's injected himself with a sample of the C virus, but it seems to have no effect on him. See, in this game, the C virus has 2 effects on people. It can be inhaled through a gas, creating your classic zombies, or it can be injected directly into your bloodstream, creating the Javo, who are still infected but retain more intelligence and motor skills, kind of like the Las Plagas or Ouroboros virus from RE4 and 5 respectively. Although this is definitely another aspect of the game I just couldn't fully agree with, the fact that enemies shoot you with guns. It just doesn't feel like Resident Evil to me. Jake is attacked by a squad mate, but swiftly fends him off. Sherry shows up to help and escort Jake, as Jake has antibiotics in his system that can help cure the virus. Sherry in this game is a government agent who has been trained in hand-to-hand combat and weapons. It's nice to see things turn out well for her later in the series, whereas last time we saw her at the end of RE2, her fate was left kind of ambiguous, not fully knowing what happened to her, aside of being an experimental lab rat. From my run of Jake's campaign, just because I didn't know much about him and I wanted to play as the character I was more familiar with. The BSAA are also in Edonia, engaged in a chaotic firefight with the Javo. After making our way through the Javo, we have one of our first encounters with Ustanak, needing to run away from him. We make a pretty close and desperate escape, encounter more in Javo. Sherry explains to Jake that Ustanak works for a terrorist organization called Nero Umbrella, who is also behind some of the shenanigans in Leon's family. We eventually run into Chris and Pierce, with a bit of a tension between Chris and Jake, sensing something is off with him. Claire gets mentioned during this conversation. Again, it would have been nice if she was in this game. Apparently, at this point in the RE timeline, she was busy with Terra Save, so I guess I can understand why she isn't here. Still, I feel like it would have been nice. A giant BOW arrives, and a boss fight commences. It's okay, you basically just have to keep shooting the weak spot on its back until you deal enough damage. As great as it is to play as Sherry, you don't feel particularly useful in this boss fight. As Jake, you can get to some areas that Sherry can't via the swinging poles. After defeating the BOW, we board a chopper and head to a safe location, only for Ustanak to arrive and try to kill us once again. He'll jump from either side of the chopper, and we just have to survive until we get to the new chopper. We get to the hull of the new chopper and shoot down 3 helicopters, followed by incoming missiles and Ustanak. We fend them off with mounted turrets on the chopper. This new action-heavy approach didn't come out of nowhere, as in a 2012 interview with Eurogamer, Resident Evil series producer Masachika Kawada said that the survival horror gaming market had become too small of a market for Resident Evil to make a successful game with that branding, and that games within the horror survival genre couldn't compete with massive AAA titles like Call of Duty in terms of commercial and critical success. This explains why this game is so much more over the top and action focused compared to previous entries. But if you look at Resident Evil 7 alone, that game proves that you can have a successful survival horror game for the modern era, make a profit, and not piss off a good chunk of the fan base. This might also be a good time to talk about the game's skill system. See, in this game, you don't earn money like you did in Resident Evil 4 and 5, nor do you have a merchant like RE4. Instead, you earn skill points, which can be used to purchase different abilities. These can range from things to basic stuff like increased melee attack damage and increased firearm damage, to increased item drop rate. I feel like Capcom dropped the ball with this system. I mainly used the firearm melee damage and increased item drop rate skills, and I felt that the skills only added a minor buff to your damage output, even once I got firearm level 2 and melee level 2. Even though I saved my skill points, I still couldn't fully upgrade these two skills by the time I got to Ada's campaign. There's an infamous trophy called Mad Skills, where you need 954,000 points to purchase and upgrade every single skill in the game, which takes a ridiculously long time to grind for. Man, I just missed the merchant from RE4. That guy was great, adding personality to RE4, as well as having exciting new weapons and item upgrades for you, making progression more exciting. Even though RE4 didn't have an equivalent, at least it still had the same basic system. Chapter 2 starts with Sherry and Jake recovering from the wreck of a plane crash with a piece of the shrapnel lodged in Sherry's back. Jake hesitantly removes it from her, only for her wounds to regenerate due to her exposure to the G-Virus. Sherry soon discovers that all of Jake's data that is needed to make a vaccine is gone. Jake agrees to help Sherry collect on the data, just so he can get paid for his services. So, we set forth to find the data chips that contain this data. This level is actually pretty big, and we come across the new Javo variants, such as these enemies that hatch from a human-shaped cocoon and can fly. We can also come across the regular type here as well. You even get access to a snowmobile at one point to traverse the level. It's neat, although it is a little awkward to control. After finding all 3 data chips, Sherry and Jake take refuge in a nearby cabin from the snowstorm. We actually get a nice cutscene out of it as well.
I'll go get help. It can't be that much further to the rendezvous.
Oh, wait! So, you always been like that? The whole healing thing?
My dad was a scientist. He was working on BOWs when I was exposed. Luckily, I was treated with the vaccine before it was too late. But the virus adjusted and adapted. It's been a part of me ever since.
What happened to your father?
His research killed him. By the time he died, his body had mutated so much, he wasn't even recognizable.
Sorry, I didn't mean to...
That's all right. Besides, I didn't walk out of it empty-handed.
Yeah, you got superpowers.
That's not what I meant. The people who saved me, Leon and Claire, are the closest friends I've ever had.
Claire is that BSAA guy's sister, right?
They risked their lives for me back in Raccoon City. I guess I'm still just trying to live up to their example. Never giving up. No matter the odds.
Speaking of odds... looks like we got some party crashers. This cabin's invitation only.
With Jake and Sherry bonding over their complicated family relationships and their unique abilities due to the virus exposure, Javo shortly ambushes us, forcing us into a firefight. We deal with the Javo only for an intense avalanche to arrive, and we escape onto nearby snowmobiles, only to run into Ustanak again. This part is actually pretty intense. Due to our limited resources, our only option is to sneak past him. I failed this section in spectacular fashion a few times, but we eventually sneak past him to obtain a key card. However, we get spotted. We lose him and find a giant drill machine that's conveniently sitting nearby, which we use to fight off Ustanak through a series of QuickTime events. We escape the caverns, only to get captured by Ada Wong and Nero Umbrella, with Ada revealing that Jake is the son of Albert Wesker. Chapter 3 starts with Jake and Sherry waking up in some kind of research facility with a 6-month time jump. Jake soon takes care of some of the guards and makes his way to Sherry. As Sherry, you wake up in a different part of the research facility and wait for Jake to turn off the power so you can escape. We sneak out of the immediate area by watching a guard put in the passcode for a door while hiding in a locker. We can meet up with Jake, get changed, and he explains that Nero Umbrella's plan is to use the antibiotics in his body to enhance the C virus. Jake isn't taking the fact that his father, Albert Wesker, was a maniac that tried to destroy the world with the Ouroboros virus in the last game very well. Frustrated with his current situation because of his relation to Wesker, and concerned that he's destined to follow a similar fate to him, like the sins of the father passing down onto the son type of way, Sherry tells Jake that his father's actions don't define him and that he has to take responsibility for what he's done at some point. We make our way through the building, shooting Java and these lizard enemies that run fast and shoot spikes at you. We eventually get to the front entrance, but we need ID tokens to progress. By depositing them into the giant statue, this area is pretty big and can be confusing to tell where you haven't gone yet. Also, I hardly got any ammo for like half of this mission for some reason, so I had to resort to using my stun baton at one point. This is pretty much why I used the item drop rate increase skill for the majority of the game. We also retrieve the data from Jake's experiments, and Sherry calls for some assistance. We make our way escape, only for a giant tank to chase us. I know Jake is the son of Wesker, but come on, this is a little excessive. One shootout later, and we can escape on a nearby motorcycle, ending chapter 3. We make a desperate escape on a motorcycle, fending off Java on motorcycles as Sherry while Jake rides the motorcycle, escaping a helicopter. This section is pretty nuts. Sherry gets flung off the motorcycle, dangling onto the chopper so she doesn't fall to her death, explosions, this really funny glitch where Jake and Sherry fly into the sky with the motorcycle, and this death-defying leap over a chopper. We crash the bike, and we run into Pierce and Chris again. We have to kill some more Javo, and we have to fend off the helicopter. This part also kinda sucks. You never get a decent shot of the chopper. There's areas that Jake can get to with his pole swinging ability that Sherry can't get to, and you can't really tell if you're damaging the chopper or not. Anyway, we eventually take out the chopper and make our way through the shopping district. Even though it doesn't really scream Resident Evil, I really like how China looks in some of these levels. It's kind of got this dilapidated neon-soaked aesthetic with a warm hue over it. We even get some verticality going up and over some of the building complexes. It helps to make it feel less linear. We encounter another boss type, BOW, clearly modeled after Dr. Salvador from Resident Evil 4, with a weird chainsaw arm. You remember playing Resident Evil 4 for the first time? Do you remember doing that village fight and seeing this guy show up and all you got is a pistol and a shotgun? Remember how tense that fight was? Well, watch this.
Don't get too close! You'll be ripped to shreds!
Yeah, thanks! I know what a chainsaw can do!
Now's our chance!
He's all yours! Did that do it?
I think he's down.
It's kind of funny but sad at the same time. We run into Leon and Helena shortly after, redoing the Ustanak fight from Jake and Sherry's perspective. Look, I get that it's a common tactic for game studios to reuse assets to save time and money. Hell, Yakuza, one of my favorite game series, does it all the time. But by the time I got to Ada's campaign, I got a bit tired of seeing the same cutscenes and having to redo some of the same boss fights again. I appreciate that Capcom was trying to do something different with having an expansive story with multiple campaigns and having this connective tissue between them, but I don't think they executed it well here at all. It just makes the story feel a bit bloated. Afterwards, we have to navigate across a river, jumping across multiple boats, killing these flying enemies, normal Java, and oh yeah, that chainsaw guy's back. We fend them off, but a mysterious sniper finishes them off. Want to know who it is? Well, you gotta keep watching. The final chapter of Jake's campaign starts with Jake and Sherry getting kidnapped and trapped in an oil rig. We shortly break free from our bindings and retrieve our weapons. This level is pretty confusing. You basically have to go up and down this rotating pillar and pulling switches to unlock separate doors to progress. A lot of these rooms look identical, even though they have letters on them, and it's hard to tell if you're going the right way or not. If the person I played this with is somehow watching this, I apologize for being directionally challenged. After solving the puzzle, another BOW attacks us. We kill him, but it accidentally pulls a lever, causing the pillar to overload and malfunction. We make our way back to the main area, almost falling to our death and getting crushed by the other platform. We run into Chris and Pierce again, and we get a pretty tense scene.
Chris!
Glad to see you're okay.
Wait, was that you who just freed us?
Looks like you guys saved the day again, huh? I can see your father in you.
How did you know
Wait,
where-
hold on a second. So you knew him? Yeah, I did. But I'm the one that killed him. It was you? That's right.
Chris?
Better put a leash on that puppy.
This is between me and him.
Go ahead.
Shoot. You have every right to. Just promise me you'll survive. The world depends on it.
Who the hell are you to tell me what to do?
Stop it!
Put your gun down! Now!
Tell me, we just following orders? Or was it personal?
Both.
Jake, please stop.
Put a bullet in your
Put
head!
your gun down.
Drop your
Don't
weapon!
do this!
There are more important things at stake than you and me.
We gotta go!
Jake!
I know!
Honestly, I just find it odd that they just didn't bring Sheva back from RE5 for Chris's co-op partner. She also killed Wesker back in RE5, and it would have been nice to see that relationship develop. She's also still in the BSAA around this time, so that just makes it even more confusing. I guess Capcom just wanted to distance themselves from RE5 for this game? I don't know. Let me know what you think in the comments. Neo Umbrella thugs invade the oil rig, and we have to make our way up the facility on a moving platform, fending them off, as well as a giant sea monster type of BOW. More about that in Chris's campaign. We get separated from Chris and Pierce, making our way deeper into the oil rig. This is where we have our final Usanek boss fight. This room is pretty bizarre though, like what is the purpose would it even have if it wasn't for a boss fight? It's pretty similar to the other fight until we get to the end. As Jake, you get to fist fight Usanek on a platform, and as Sherry, you just have to line up boxes over Usanek and drop them onto him to assist Jake. Because I played as Sherry, I don't have any exciting footage of Jake fighting the boss, so enjoy this box smashing action. Jake knocks Usanek off into the lava, and we make our escape from the oil rig as it blows up. Not without Usanek coming back for revenge. We crawl our way up the platform, release some boxes and debris, and knock him back into the lava, finally killing him. The campaign ends with Jake's blood creating a vaccine for the C virus, his relation to Wesker being made top secret to avoid controversy, and Jake literally riding off into the sunset on a motorcycle, completing his arc from a cold mercenary to someone who's more altruistic. Overall, I really like this campaign. I like Jake's arc, the bond him and Sherry build over the campaign, the Usanek segments, and the level in China was fun, even if the chainsaw guy was really easy. I didn't like it as much as Leon's, but it was solid overall. Now, on to Chris's campaign. Chris's campaign starts out on a pretty dark note. Chris is in a bar in Eastern Europe, trying to drink and smoke his pain away, traumatized from his events in the BSAA, also known as the Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance, and probably from the events of Resident Evil 1, Code Veronica, and RE5. He suffers from post-traumatic amnesia and survivor's guilt as Pierce Nivens, another member of the BSAA, tries to jog Chris's memory on a mission that wiped out his squad, and gives him a pep talk to try and go back and join the BSAA, and realize that he can't hide from his problems. Pierce basically serves as his clear conscience to stop him from going too far. With renewed vigor, Chris goes back as a captain of a new squad, with their first mission going in Yip, China. I like this little detail of Chris shoving this cameraman out of his way. I don't know, I just find it funny. China also looks pretty good in this level too, just like in Jake's campaign. We make our way through the streets, wiping out countless Java. This campaign is definitely the most action heavy out of all of them. It's like if the movies 28 Days Later and Black Hawk Down had a love child. You'll also spend the most amount of time in cover too, which is where my frustrations with it started to grow. I forgot to mention as well that the Java have different mutations, to them having giant arms and shields, to these bizarre butterfly forms. There isn't really much to say, you just shoot, punch and stomp Java for a while until we make it to this apartment complex and rescue some hostages. Chris orders a bombing on the building, but before the dust settles, we find some soldiers encased in human-like cocoons. The sight triggers a massive spike in his amnesia. Chapter 2 starts off with a flashback to Eastern Europe and Edonia, during one of Chris's missions with the BSAA. Upon examining a deceased member of his squad, Chris gives an uplifting speech to his squad as well as a new rookie named Finn, who I'm absolutely sure isn't going to die horribly at all. Shortly after we get into a conflict with more Javo, storming our way through the city, shooting and attacking anything that moves, we will probably notice a running pattern here. Chris's levels are more action focused in the game, none of that atmosphere or horror touches like in Leon's campaign or the stalker-like monster in Jake's. It's really just cover-based shooting Javo for a lot of it, where you can definitely feel Capcom looking at other popular third-person shooters for inspiration, like Gears of War. We meet Sherry and Jake from Chris's point of view, although we get to the same cutscene again. We come across the giant BOW, kill it, and go our separate ways. We investigate City Hall and come across a new enemy type, these rock-like BOWs, which you need to shoot in the back in order to damage it. It's nice to fight something that isn't the same Java enemies over and over again. Conflicts with these guys can be pretty tense too, especially if there's a lot of them you have to avoid. You can also damage them with grenades too, but it's better just to shoot them in the back. We come across Ada Wong and escort her out of the building, in hopes that she can provide more information about the C virus and Nero Umbrella, although it's obvious she knows more than she's letting on. And if you guessed that if she's going to do something dodgy, you'd be correct. She traps Chris's unit in a cage, separating Chris and Pierce as well. She proceeds to throw in some kind of grenade that affects everyone except Chris and Pierce with the C virus, molding them into cocoons and BOWs, and explaining Chris's amnesia. Chris regains his memories of what happened and is now driven by rage and revenge for what Ada did to Chris's unit. Pierce spends this chapter trying to rein Chris in, making sure he doesn't get himself, Chris, or their unit killed recklessly. Oh, and also an Easter egg, you can ride this panda and go down the slide for some catharsis. So more Javo slaughtering later, we eventually do a boss fight against an attack helicopter, which we take down by a conveniently placed grenade launcher. We track down another BOW nearby, and it's a giant snake, kind of like Yawn from RE1, but with the ability to turn invisible this time. For me personally, Chapter 3 is the highlight of Chris's campaign, and this boss fight is one of them. It's tense and suspenseful as you navigate an apartment complex, trying to ambush the invisible snake, as it slowly takes out your men one by one. If you look closely, you'll be able to see its outline. Eventually, we'll corner the snake into an electrified maze. In order to defeat the snake, one person has to lure the snake into an electrified area, while the other player pulls the lever, frying the snake. After defeating the snake, we pursue Ada again, jumping across boats and appear like it's Super Mario, dodging Java and boarding a large boat where we shoot another chopper down. We eventually track her down to a warehouse, and this section is exactly the same as Leon's, so I won't go over it again. We continue our pursuit of Ada, ending the chapter on a vehicle's turret section, shooting Java on bikes and other cars until we crash onto a carrier, thus ending the chapter. Chapter 4 starts with us exploring the ship. This level starts out pretty big and expansive, almost like a big arena, with multiple flanking points for both us and the Nero Umbrella units. You'll encounter enemies mainly from a distance. We eventually navigate to the top side of the ship, and this area is a lot more close quarters and claustrophobic, making encounters feel a lot more tight. We run into Ada again and pursue her, but she gets the slip. She also appears to be wearing different clothes. I wonder why. Also, we encounter this unique enemy that's a bunch of flies that take the form of a human. It doesn't appear to do any damage until you hit this larger insect. We eventually catch up to Ada, and she reveals her plan to not only recreate the Raccoon City incident, but to infect the entire world with the C virus. A sniper on a chopper appears and kills Ada as she falls to her death on the top of the carrier. We make our way to the rear of the hangar to try and find the plane so we can prevent the attack from happening. We run into the squid enemies again, and a cutscene plays to show how scary they are, and they're basically just a pushover. I feel like Capcom was trying to present these guys as the regenerators of this game, but failed. In RE4, when you come across a regenerator, you have to be precise and accurate with your shots in order to kill them. Here, they're incredibly resilient, as they'll continue their assault even if you shoot off multiple limbs. Anyway, we come across a door that needs multiple key codes, requiring us to navigate this floor of the ship, fighting off these squid enemies and backtracking to this locked door. This part kind of reminds me of Revelations 1, which is a game that I need to get around to playing I also feel like this section was added here to try and give Chris's campaign some classic RE flavor, which I would appreciate if it wasn't for this next section coming up. You see, Chris and Pierce find a fighter jet and... Yep, your eyes are not playing tricks on you, ladies and gentlemen. We're playing a Resident Evil game where you fly a fighter jet, do barrel rolls, and shoot down other infected people that somehow have the capacity to fly an aircraft too. I guess someone on the Capcom development team was a fan of the Ace Combat games. Pierce leaves the jet so he can find the control unit for the missile and prevent it from launching into the nearby city. We come across the giant boss from Chapter 2 again. We fail to stop the missile launch as it lands on the nearby city, infecting the population. Chris and Leon talk via radio and request that Chris and Pierce go onto a nearby oil rig so we can rescue Sherry and Jake, which is where we head for the finale of Chris's campaign. Chapter 5 starts with Chris and Pierce arriving at the oil rig. As they ride down the elevator, Chris proclaims that he can't fight the war against BOW terrorism forever and says that once they rescue Jake and Sherry, he plans to retire and pass the torch over to Pierce. Thankfully, this version of the oil rig is much more straightforward than Jake and Sherry's. This level will basically throw every enemy you've faced so far, testing your abilities. This particular section, where you need to hold off a bunch of tough enemies until a nearby door unlocks, I found to be tense. The deer I catch up with the others, the big confrontation between Chris and Jake happens, we fend off more Neo Umbrella soldiers on the elevator, and shortly after we have an encounter with this giant water-like BOW. We make a run for it, escalating up to the oil rig and fighting it off once we're cornered. We temporarily fight it off, but it pursues us again shortly after. We're cornered once again, and we're in a desperate situation. The BOW is holding Chris in its grasp and is in a desperate move. Pierce infects himself with a sample of the C virus, giving him abilities like shooting lightning out of his mutated hand. This boss fight is actually pretty confusing if you're playing as Chris. It doesn't even look like you're hurting the BOW, even if you're shooting his glowing weak points. In the cutscene that plays before this fight, it implies that only Pierce can hurt it, adding to the confusion. I also ran out of ammo at one point, leaving it up to Pierce to do all the work while I just ran around like a headless chicken. At one point, the BOW knocks Chris down again, putting him in a down state. I died during this section the first time, but it's not clear what you're supposed to do. Turns out, you're supposed to crawl over to the BOW and help finish it off. Once we kill it, we have to make a desperate escape to the escape pods of the oil rig as it falls apart. We finally make it to the pods, and Pierce pushes Chris into the pod, sacrificing himself and saving Chris from the impending doom before the infection completely consumes Pierce and turns him into a monster. It's a pretty somber ending for Chris, basically still stuck in the never-ending war against the BOWs and the remnants of the Umbrella Corporation. Overall, I had fun with Chris's campaign, but I was starting to get tired of this game's loop of shoot, melee, QTE, take cover, fly a jet like your Tom Cruise in Top Gun. You can definitely feel the Gear of War style influence and inspiration that the developers were leaning into, really trying to appeal to a wider audience. The actual story isn't bad, and I thought Chris's arc throughout his campaign was engaging, as well as his relationship with Pierce. I personally would have preferred if they brought Sheva back and developed that relationship from RE5 onward, but at least they give Pierce a good ending. Now, on to Ada's campaign. Now, before we get into Ada's campaign, I'd like to bring up a couple things. Unlike the other campaigns, this one was actually designed to be a solo experience and not be played in co-op. People complained, and Capcom released an update that gave Ada a partner, even if they aren't in any cutscenes. I guess Ada just gets schizophrenia in this game. Enter Agent, a faceless, silent character in generic body armor and a gas mask. What's even worse is the fact that you can't open doors, get key items, or do anything substantial. The solo level design just makes the second player feel like a passive spectator rather than an active participant. Couldn't they have just made Ada's partner Hunk? I don't know if that would have made any sense story-wise, but at least it would have been a fun bit of fan service and not a half-assed co-op partner slapped together quickly. Anyway, Ada's campaign starts with her infiltrating a submarine on the sea and quietly taking down Neo Umbrella enemies. Reminds me of the opening tanker section in Metal Gear Solid 2. It's nice to do something different for a change as well. We sneak and fire our way through the submarine, And oh my gosh, look at this! A puzzle! I haven't seen one of these since Leon's campaign. It's a pretty simple one, but it's nice to see one anyway. After a few shootouts, one of the Neo Umbrella enemies shoots an explosive barrel, causing the tanker to start sinking. We eventually start to make our way through the sinking tanker and make our way to the escape pods. We also get to see Ada use her hookshot at certain points and navigate to certain areas like Spider-Man. We eventually get to a section where we have to talk into a microphone in order to get authorization to enter the pod. I don't know if I was just getting tired of the gameplay loop or if I just suck, but I found this section to be really hard. You hardly get any room to maneuver, they swarm you, and enemies swarm you and do big damage if you get too close, and you barely have ammo to fend them off, even with the item drop rate increased skill. I guess the game felt sorry for me because I died on one of my attempts, but I still passed it anyway. As Ada prepares to escape, Derek Simmons explains his name to frame Ada for an upcoming bioterrorism attack by Neo Umbrella, so we set off to try and clear the real Ada's name. Chapter 2 starts off with Ada arriving at the cathedral, the same one that Leon and Helena went to during their story. This section is similar to Leon's as well, with puzzles and classic slow-moving zombies. We even have to find pieces of a medallion to unlock a door. The puzzles here are actually pretty tricky too, like this one where you have to push this switch, then have a zombie drop down onto said switch to activate a nearby hatch, or pinning down a zombie against a wall with your crossbow so you don't activate a pressure plate. After some backtracking and key item collection, we eventually catch up with Leon and Helena during the Deborah encounter. We help out and go our separate ways into the underground lab. This section is pretty tough, with these big tank-like enemies hunting you down, looking for key items to proceed. I found the best strategy is just to avoid them as much as possible, almost like a game of cat and mouse. We eventually find the same tape Leon found in his story, revealing that the other Ada is a clone named Carla Ramirez, a brilliant researcher that worked for Derek Simmons that had an affection for him. Simmons didn't feel the same way, but he signed her up for the Project Ada program and conditioned Carla to basically become a perfect copy of Ada, as Simmons was obsessed with Ada. Carla is the one that also infects Simmons in Leon's campaign. So this whole game basically happens because some guy was a massive Ada simp. Awesome. Just awesome stuff. We get to see where Ada was during Jake's campaign. You can even do the slight Easter egg in Ada's campaign as well. We just fight through the Java and some lizard dudes for a while, and encounter that chainsaw BOW from the other campaigns. We get into a boss fight, and this one's kinda dumb. You fight on the top of a giant bus, and you barely have any room to maneuver, nor do you have any firepower to go in the offensive. You can swing to opposite sides of the bus with a hookshot like Spider-Man, but that isn't made apparent to you at first. Also, the death scene is pretty insane and it's a little bit too long. After fighting it at several different locations, it goes after Sherry and Jake. We help them by sniping Java from a distance, as well as finishing them off after the chainsaw BOW. We also get to see Chris and Pierce chasing after Carla from a distance, and thus ends the chapter with Ada getting on a jet ski. Chapter 4 starts with Ada infiltrating the ship from Chris and Pierce's campaign. It's pretty much identical from Chris's level. It even has the same locked door that you need to find passcodes for. There's a section where you have to avoid searchlights in order to avoid getting spotted, as well as the classic crawling through vents section you've probably seen a million times. We eventually find some data and information on Project Ada, revealing what I mentioned earlier. We also see Carla fall to her death and examine her corpse. She soon wakes up and begins to mutate in a giant clay-like monster, engulfing the ship. We run away from her for a while until we're cornered, and we have to expose her to nitroglycerin to freeze her. We escape on a nearby helicopter, making our way to help Leon and Helena with Simmons. Here we are, ladies and gentlemen, the big finale of this entire story. As Ada, we fly over China and observe all the chaos of the outbreak. We help Leon and Helena navigate the streets, as well as shoot down some nearby Neo Umbrella helicopters. We get the boss fight arena with Simmons and help out by shooting him with the minigun of a helicopter. It's a bit repetitive. You don't even have to dodge Simmons or any other gunfire. You just move and shoot. We fly up eventually after Simmons goes down, helping some nearby survivors from hordes of zombies. We help Leon and Helena for the second and the final Simmons fight. It's pretty much exactly the same as in Leon's campaign. You kill Simmons, disappear, and Ada's campaign ends with her infiltrating the lab where Carla became Ada.
So, this is where Carla did her experiments, huh?
Another failure. Bring me another subject. Why do you think we had this lab built here in the first place? Just go outside. There's thousands of subjects to choose from. Tell Simmons that we're busy. I'm on the verge of solving this. Are you refusing my orders? You're the one who chose me as a test subject, aren't you?
No, it was Simmons. He forced me to. Please, don't do this!
Believe it or not, I said the exact same thing. Finally done it. This will be my greatest work yet.
We're beyond sympathy at this point. We're beyond humanity. A job, huh? Sure. My schedule just cleared.
It's a nice moment, showing Ada take control of her identity from Simmons' obsession. So after a long journey, what are my final thoughts on this game? Well, I feel like this game is painfully average and a bit bloated. They added all these new mechanics like sliding, expanded melee systems, dodging and quick firing, yet I discovered some of these moves by total accident as they are not conveyed to the player at all. As I mentioned in the previous sections, elements like replacing the merchant/shop with an infamously grindy skill system that barely has any real tangible effect on gameplay, as well as removing the inventory management from RE4, feels like downgrades. The issue isn't even just the fact that the game is too action heavy, it just feels like more repetitive and dumbed down action from compared to other entries in the series like RE4 and 5. Gone are enemies dynamically reacting to your gunshots, as well as thinking about your spacing and positioning and resources. All that's been thrown out the window for doing the most amount of damage as quickly as possible. There are some positives. I actually think the graphics are pretty nice for a 2012 game. And aside from Derek's motivations, I like some aspects of the individual story campaigns, like with Chris's character arc, some of the more atmospheric parts of Leon's campaign, and Ustanak stalking you in Jake's campaign, as well as the story overall. Some of the new characters like Jake and Helena, I don't even mind either. Are they my new favourites in the Resident Evil franchise? No, but I didn't hate their inclusion either, and I wouldn't be angry if they showed up in a future RE game. However, I feel like this game is just having an identity crisis at the same time, where it doesn't fully know what it wants to be. You'll be slowly walking through a university that's overrun with zombies in Leon's campaign, only to be flying jets like it's Top Gun in Chris's campaign. It's like Capcom was trying to make a game that would appeal to a wider audience, yet desperately trying to shoehorn in some classic Resident Evil elements like backtracking, classic zombies, and finding keys for locked doors. Is it the worst game I've ever played? No. I've played far worse games, but it really does a disservice to the Resident Evil franchise.